And you should see a little red light up in the left-hand corner. There we go. So welcome, everyone. We have our most frequent guest star of this show is Sue Dale Hall. I think this is your third time being with us. We love it each and every time. Sue Cattell has asked you to join in. And then Jay Franklin from the county is also here to help having a conversation about where we are with childcare and the rapidly changing environment with childcare. Amy, now as host, if you can just enable screen sharing, I know that Sue is planning at some point to share a document or two. So we'll turn it right over to you, Sue Dale Hall. Welcome. Welcome back.
Hi. Hi. Well,
can I just interrupt and say, George, while we're listening to Sue, if you could align your head under the swoop of Community Foundation, you may resemble a certain nearly elected official. Look at that. Name that character. Okay. Sorry for the digression. And now let's get back to business.
Thank you, Sue. Some people think of this as a swoop. Some people call it a bridge. Some people see it as a rising sun. It's a real
Well, it's not a hairstyle, you know. Yeah. It's okay.
It's a hairstyle. Some people have driven by and ordered fries, you know. So it's all do with that.
Okay. And on that serious note.
Wow. Hi. Thanks for having me. I guess it's my turn now.
It's all yours.
All right. So I guess I'm here with a difficult subject, which is that I'm very, very concerned about childcare and its viability in the future. We all know that we are facing a childcare crisis before the pandemic, and there are things that have happened throughout the pandemic that have just exacerbated the concerns that I have and the financial situation of childcare programs. I don't really believe that any single group could solve this problem. And so mostly what I'm coming to you for is your brain trust, because let's face it, you all are really smart people and you know more than I do. So maybe you can help us figure out some new strategies or some way to try to keep what childcare we have. I think that the long-term strategy is going to also be a community one. We're going to have to figure out how to prevent this kind of thing from happening over and over again. So let me just make sure that we're all on the same page. I think we are when I look around and see who's here. Childcare really is designed to be, it's financed on parent fees per enrollment, per child, per age room. And that is to cover a fixed set of staffing and physical plant costs. That's why you see things like no insurance for their staff, because that's something they can control. But most of their expenses, they cannot control. They have to have a fixed number of staff and they have to have their space, and their space has to meet the requirements. So when you have such an uncertain time like now, and enrollment is fluctuating, that's really causing the basis for the problem. Most childcare programs don't have the reserve or the backup to make it through. I'll have to say that that's how they've been getting through up until now. A lot of programs have been using their reserves. So I'm going to show this because what I want to do is, you know, with parent fees, childcare programs are always trying to balance that. It's an expensive business from a parent's perspective. That's a lot of money. But it's not enough money to pay fees at a living wage for their employees, to do the kinds of things like planning for the future or having a reserve. So they're always balancing those things, and they hit that point of diminishing returns pretty quickly. That point where if we kept raising the price, people just won't come and they'll find care or not underground. So that's sort of the situation, or they'll stop work. They'll not work at all, which they reduced hours or come up with lots of different arrangements to try to address their issues. So that's the ongoing situation. And I'm going to share my screen because it's helpful for me to use it as a guide to walk through. I can, it's a little bit too much detail, but just look for the headers and I'll kind of, so Amy, we disabled my screen sharing. So if you could re-enable it, that would be, or enable it, that would be great. So what I'm going to basically do is walk you through the influences of what's happening during the pandemic that's brought us to this really crisis point where we're going to see some programs close. And with their permission, I'm giving you some examples of what's happening in a few of the childcare situations. Should we try it now? Okay. So like I said, there's a lot of words here, and I'm hoping that you don't have to feel like you have to read it. The value of having it on the screen is that people who are watching this tape recording later can access the information. It's written in my cryptic language, but essentially across the top we have group and family daycare, so home-based care, which has survived a little bit better in some ways throughout this pandemic. They have a little bit more flexibility. Infant toddler care, because the group sizes are different. Preschools, and I'm just focusing on centers. There's lots of different kinds. I've excluded Head Start and school-based preschool. And school-age childcare, which also comes in many, many different forms, but I'm referring to the regulated care, which is what we have in the Ithaca City School District and a couple of the outlying areas. Other outlying areas, the schools operate their after-school program, and so they have a lot more flexibility in how they operate. So the biggest impact we have that's consistent across the types of care is the reduced group size. So Office of Children and Family Services establishes a maximum group size by age group. And I've kind of included what that is here, but in the time of the pandemic, the Department of Health guidelines precede that. So they come first, whichever that is. So it's 15 maximum group size, regardless of the age range. So the largest impact is on preschool and centers and school-age childcare. So in a preschool program, you can have 18 kids if you're there, 3-year-olds with 2 caregivers, or 21 kids if they're 4-year-olds. It's an incredibly crazy kind of system. However, that is what the case is. So when you have your maximum group size of 15 and you're down 6 spots, that means you're down 6 spots in revenue every week. The range that I show here is $1,470 to $1,950 that they're losing per classroom per week. And the reason that I showed you the $1,470 is that's the market rate. That's the rate that the government will pay for low-income children. And the top end is more about the community market rate, what the community will pay. And it does involve, it's not the same for everyone. They have the right to set their own rates. In fact, we can't get them to all set one rate because that would be price fixing. So I just tried to provide you a range so you could see that. In school age care, they reduce 5 spots. So they can have 20 kids per group. And I gave you an hourly rate because right now they're being called to do real different kind of work. They're doing care sometimes in the middle of the day, 2 days a week, or 3 days a week, or 5 days a week, or evenings and weekends. It's really quite a big change. So this alone has caused a financial problem. And the instigating group was the Coddington Road Childcare is losing about $15,000 a month on the 9 spaces they're not able to fill at all. And all of them are facing some kind of fluctuations, but this will be their maximum loss ongoing basis. They have a couple of other situations. Almost all of them have something else that interferes with their ability. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'm happy to talk with you about it if it comes up. So this reduced group size puts everyone operating below their break even right from the get-go. So the questionable, and so you can see that it's in green, red, yellow, red. And the reason that I did that was because there's some hot spots within our own childcare community. Some things are more impacted than others. The uneven enrollment is something that really is affecting school-age childcare programs. So of the 16 registered school-age childcare programs, only 44% will not open this fall. 7 of those will not open this fall. And that's for financial reasons. They don't have enough children, enough space, enough capacity to make it financially viable at all. Northeast Kids Count, Tracy was on the call, the WRFI Childcare Town Talk, and she says that her enrollment's going to be at about 28% of what her capacity, her licensed capacity is. And what that means for her is that she'll be taking a loss even with those kids, because say you had 28 kids in her 100 kid capacity, she'll have to have full staffing even though she won't have full enrollment.
Can I say, is that because kids won't come, or is that because of the regulations limiting them to 28%?
That's because families aren't coming.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the group, limited group size, they would never be able to be at their full capacity.
Right.
But it's not like it usually is. You build it, they will come. It's not the case here. Parents are feeling very uncertain. And if you look, I put the downtown Ithaca childcare here. They thought they were going to be at 91% capacity. I'll call it the DOH capacity. It's their maximum COVID capacity, which for preschoolers would be 15. For younger children, it would be the same. They thought they were going to be at 91%, and they're offering their spaces to parents who've been in their program before first, and that's dropped to 80%. They think they'll hit 80% this month. So they're losing money every time that happens, and every time that change happens. And we experienced the same thing in summer care and summer camps. So parents said to us very loudly and very clearly, we want summer care program. We have to have it. We're suffering here. This is too difficult for our children. They need to get out and about and be with other kids. And so let's figure out how to make it safe, but let's make it happen. And there were several programs that did step up, and none of them were full. So parents are skittish, and employers are calling me and saying, please help us. We want them to come back to work, and we need them, especially the essential personnel. And we'll do our best, but it's really, it's a tough situation. I want to add that right now cash flow is a problem for the child care programs, and the New York State, which is the federal CARES money that's come through New York State for child care, is being implemented at a incredibly slow pace. So the money that they had set aside is about $500,000 for our community. For 20, I think it's 23 or maybe it's 28. I think it's 23 programs. We submitted their claims, 7 of the 23 so far, and it's been 3 weeks. We haven't received the funding. They were expected to either ask for an advance or to spend their grants. For Covington Road, I believe it's about $28,000 grant, or spend their grant and then ask for reimbursement. The problem is they don't have the cash flow to spend it on the front end. And the advance issue, it became a moot point for a variety of state reasons, mess ups. It didn't happen. But the local issue for me was that I can't advance money, even if it's state money and they give it to me, and be liable for providers who spend it on the wrong thing and aren't able to produce receipts. It's just too much money for my agency to risk. So that money is it will come down, it will happen. There's another round being advertised now, but it's not going to be, it's definitely not it's a cost for folks, not a savings for them. It's not a help. We had one program this happens all the time where programs they don't have enough money to meet capital expenditures and keep upkeep on their building. And so we had a heater boiler go, that's about $12,000. So when the emergency expenses come up right now, because they've been using their reserves to try to make it through from month to month, they don't have any funding for that. Some programs operate with very little reserves, and some do a little bit better because they charge higher fees. So I'm less concerned about the increased cost for COVID, except where it applies to staffing. And all programs are supposed to have a safety monitor. Some people are big enough that they can assign their administrative assistant to do that job, and others don't have one. So so that's a bit of an issue. The that money does come down through CARES and comes pretty smoothly. And our community was incredibly generous at the very beginning, and has been throughout. So we are doing better than some other communities in this regard, because we've had some really big successes in that way. And then we did have a quarantine in one room was shut down, and so the cost of that has an impact on programs. When we started, just say one thing, is that when we started this, parents were saying to us, well, how come they're still charging me my fees? Say they closed mid-March and they paid through March, or maybe even paid April. And they're saying they're not giving me my money back, or they're asking me if I can not take my money back. That was usually the approach. But the problem was that they still wanted to try to keep their staffing going throughout. So their goal is to keep their staff, because replacing it with a staffing shortage would be really, really difficult. So I'm going to stop for a second and see if there are questions.
Can you say again about the piece about advancing money in the CARES Act? And I didn't quite catch the details of what it's supposed to look like and why it's not working.
So they've defined the accessibility to CARES in a number of different ways. There's restructuring grants, which basically means we're going to help pay for one-time costs. Maybe it's a portable sink, or maybe it's PPE, but there's small grants of $1,600. That's usually pretty flexible. Then there are these new grants that came in CARES 2. CARES has been divided up in New York State into 3 packages. So CARES 2 for temporary operating or expansion. And in that system, they were supposed to pay for 3 months of funding to help them operate. It could be for staffing, rent, whatever, sort of ongoing expenses, and it would be a decreasing grant. When they first put it out, they asked, in the first application that they put out, they said they didn't say that people could ask for an advance. And Tompkins County programs jumped on and filled out that application. And then the second one, the second issuance of the same application, they did provide for that. So it's been sort of a confusing thing, and no one in Tompkins County has received an advance to help pay for the services, the support, so they can have receipts to request the reimbursement. So they don't usually operate on after the fact like many nonprofits do. They operate with this cash flow of regular fees coming and going. And so they don't have the money to upfront for those expenses, and the grants are sizable.
So the grants are for sort of outstanding unpaid expenses that then you'll get money for to pay?
They can be operational expenses, but yeah. So
they're
saying pay for your staff pay for your staff to open a new room, and then submit the reimbursement request for it. But they don't have the money to do it that.
You could do it before the money gets there. I got you. Thanks.
Other questions? I hope I painted an appropriately bleak picture here.
Very bleak.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it is bleak.
It's bleak without a lot of really good answers or possible solutions. I mean, and this is happening throughout the entire system, not just in our community, but in adjacent communities as well, right?
Yes,
Can you
Yes,
talk,
I think everybody's facing that.
can you talk a little bit more about the child care workers? You know, you had said that one of the big goals is to keep workers, and then also what the different daycares are thinking that they'll see as far as possible cases, and many times kids might not have symptoms. And so can you talk some about the child care workers and how that is going to keep them working, and then that other piece about what do you think that we'll see with cases within childcare itself?
So child care has been considered essential, so it's been operating ever since, although we lost about 55% at the very beginning. So it was either voluntary or it was the child care centers that were closed under executive order. So we've had very little incidents. This is the first one I've heard of. And I think that they're being extremely cautious. They're used to having safety protocols in place. They've just upped the game, as we all have, with some new ones. It's presented some problems. But I don't think that the incidence is the biggest risk, although I have to say that it never made sense to me. I'll just put it out there because I can't enter into a room without saying this. It doesn't make sense to me that children are not safe in schools, but they are safe in childcare. That just kind of always reflected the lack of respect for childcare, I think, out there. However, nevertheless, they have been there and present. I think the staffing issue is an age-old one. School-age programs often hire college students, so that's been a particular issue this year. I think the other challenge is that they wanted to keep them on because the process of getting someone approved to do childcare takes some time. So if you want to keep your flow going, you should normally have some people that are your subs that are in the ready to go on and do work. But that kind of planning it's just not possible right now. So the payroll protection plan, 3 Ps, that worked for many organizations. It's been part of the solution to keep their staffing on board. Of course, you have to keep people. You can't furlough them. So during the time when they were at low enrollment, they were paying people and reaching out to families, but not really providing childcare as we know it. So it's been an issue in and of itself. And I will say that I think there was one program that was able to receive some money as a pandemic pay bonus. My son, who works at Lowe's, got money as an essential personnel, got a bonus and a wage increase. And childcare, that just didn't happen in childcare. And I think some of it is because there are a whole bunch of individual small entities. They don't have a larger over umbrella. They're a network, not a system.
Hey Sue, this is Janet. I have a question. I know you're talking about the experience of the centers themselves, but I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit to what information you're aware of with regard to how this disproportionately impacts women in households throughout our community.
You want a preview? Is that what you're asking for?
I know we're going to have a more in-depth conversation about that, but I'm just curious what's your short answer to that?
Well, the short answer is that it's a predominantly women-led field. Most of the employees are women themselves, and they're caring for other people's children and can't afford care themselves in the programs in which they work. That's atrocious and unnecessary. I think the allostatic load, the load at which our bodies start to take on the stresses of the life around us, the toxic stress, is much higher because very often this is sort of, I think women get or take, I won't say whether they're complicit in this decision or not, but they have a good deal of the responsibility for right now educating their children or supporting the education of their children, doing childcare for their younger children, and working remotely. So it's really kind of like a perfect storm for women, unfortunately. So I think, when we think about women of color, nationally, they're heavily represented in the childcare field. So you can come at it from a lot of different angles. There's about 40% of the population are women of color who work in childcare, but their wages are well below the wages that are already low of the white women. So I think that's, they're put in positions as aides or as infant care teachers, which should not be, but is an underclass in childcare. So that's a bit of we have a lot of issues in childcare, especially around how well we support our workers and the families that need it. So is that enough? Yeah,
exactly.
A tickler?
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. And awful. And I just want to point that out to this group, what we're referring to, that you're going to be the keynote at our Women's Fund luncheon this month on October 29th at 12:15, and that's one of the areas amongst these many larger issues that we really want to be focusing on. And so that's one way we're going to, help broadcast these issues to larger audiences within the community, but are certainly interested in working with other local funders around that educational piece too. Because certainly with the Community Foundation, it's these pools of funding and support come from so many different individuals and individual funds that having a broad community knowledge about this is really important. Have you done any like specific media releases or had some, write-ups so that this is getting or like what audiences are you in front of these days talking about these things?
Well, we've done the few radio programs. We did WRFI's the Town Talk on Childcare. We did it twice due to technical difficulties about halfway through, so that was fun. And we've done the All Things Equal, Cornell. We've had a few pieces in the Tompkins Weekly. I really haven't issued any broad statements across media, and it's really just been a time issue. I'm like chasing my tail a little bit. So it is something that I think needs to happen. But it's a constant. I think one of the things about this for us and most of the nonprofits is that really the conditions are constantly changing. So
Right.
It's not one message, it's many messages. What we saw in the beginning is not what we're seeing now. And so we're facing new challenges every time we turn around. And I think that it's not just in childcare, and others are facing that same challenge. I do want to be able to make sure too, we get back to it. I think George might have hopped off, but he's like, it's hard to see what the solutions can be. Oh, there you are.
I'm dropping off right now, but I mean, it's one thing to raise general level of awareness. It's quite another when there is not a specific call to action and the level of fluidity, and when there aren't specific, steps that we need to take. But I will watch the rest of the video. I apologize.
Okay.
Right, and that's the question, is like, what would you ask for? Can you just, before we sort of start brainstorming that, how are family, home, informal, so I see the centers and I can understand that a little bit easier, I guess, because of past experience, but what are we hearing from those sort of providers of 2s and 3s all over the county?
So the home-based care, Sue?
Yeah.
So we were down about 30%. That was the lowest drop in the care that we have. And I think that was at the beginning. We saw a little bit of restoration of that. Some of it will come through the CARES grant money, will help them reopen. We've had actually a few new folks enroll. I wouldn't say a few, I'll say 2. And one of them turned right around and said, no, this isn't going to financially work for me. I'm going to get a real job that pays money regularly. It's really a tough business to run on your own in a family childcare situation. Group family, you have to pay one staff, or it's a couple's doing it. Their group sizes aren't affected in the sense of the health department guidelines, so that's helpful. We have some different, I think there's a different level of sort of almost a familial response. So they know their families, and there's a level of trust that kind of comes with that.
Right.
I've been saying for a long time that when we can get stable family home care, it's really serves a lot of parents' needs very well, because they can have more than one child there and mixed age groups there together. It's much more likely, it's a culturally related to the families. You're much more likely to get that match happening around language or people of color. So there's a lot of real reasons to support it. The kinds of help that we've been able to give them the most has been around the cleaning supplies and some physical modifications. One of the challenges that came through with the CARES project was that they put out an application and said, if you're going to expand, tell us what those costs are. And then they turned around and they said, oh, no, not construction. We can't do construction, even if it means taking your garage that's a perfectly good space, as long as you don't have bad chemicals in it and cars, and make it so that it's warm enough, maybe putting in some heaters or something that would make it work, and maybe a good proper flooring and whatnot. So that's, if I were to think about the kinds of the pockets that you all might think about in brainstorming how to meet this need, I would say the first pocket is physical plant changes. That's something that we can't get with the federal money. It's apparently a federal rule. DOB has knocked it off the list. So that would be something that could happen. We had a number of programs that tried outdoor classrooms. They're saying, nope, no outdoor classrooms. Only they'll support it if you can find the money. It'll be approvable if you have correlating indoor space. So that's reasonable.
Do you mind stopping share screen so we can see each other if you're done with
Sure.
Great. All right. And then, so that might be an option for some kind of support, but that sounds like there's a lengthy timeline for some of it and possibly a larger chunk of change. Is that your assessment?
So I guess I kind of went off the rails a little bit. I think the first real step is the short-term needs. How can we help people with their short-term, get them through this next 2 months kind of thing, keep the programs alive, because if we lose them, it's going to cost us a lot more money to replace it. And that's a big challenge for us. So that's one pot, and that can come in a lot of different ways, but that's one piece. We did have some operational funds in the beginning, and that was really helpful as a bridge. So that's a model we could use because it's an operational problem. And I think we have to look at more partners, a community-wide response, if we're going to have an operational fix of any kind, or even just a Band-Aid would be good. But that
would be an immense amount of money, wouldn't it? When you're talking about programs leaking $15,000 a week.
Yep.
I mean,
yep.
Go ahead, Jean. Jean, did you have a thought?
I have a question. The Legacy Board is going to meet in early November and distribute some funds. And they've asked people to put in grant applications, which are due in a week, the 15th. And I don't have any from any childcare centers yet. So we do give money for capital in the past, and I think if it can be shown that that's a real need, like for instance, I don't know if this could work. Sue, if you apply and you ask for money that you can distribute, that could be something. We have about $100,000 to distribute this fall, and it might be $25,000. I don't know, but childcare is certainly one of their top priorities, and from what you said, that's something that please put in a grant application.
Okay.
Okay.
That could be something that others would join too. I would think about that, it just generically, just to say maybe we make a pot of funds to match what Jean's able to bring forward.
I've been
Yeah, that
talking
would be
with
terrific.
Heather McDaniel about IDA funding, because they apparently have some money that could go towards childcare. The challenge, so it is helpful when it can be, we see how the pieces fit together and plug
Yeah.
holes. So I really appreciate that, Jean, because trying to define it by the different funding sources has just become very complicated. We have 10,000 from the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency, and so that's limited here, and then we have little
Yeah.
pieces here and there. So
There-
thank you.
I think they would be very open to use your wisdom, put the money out there where it needs to be put in a grant application. So whatever.
Right. Match the sources to meet the need, yeah.
And we're still operating from that as in this group, we're sharing those requests with each other. So you want to ask for the amount that's needed for X time frame, and then as a group, we'll review that application. You don't need to apply. I'll bring the same application you give to Jean to my team at Community Foundation. So
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
aim high.
Yeah,
That's a
throw in
great
a
thought.
trip to Aruba in it. Yeah.
Yeah, just call it travel and training. Yeah. So that's one thought. Another thought I had while you were speaking is that there isn't cash for people to front the money and wait for CARES Act money to come. And I wonder if there's a way that, or that you weren't able to cover that and worried about missing receipts. Is there a way that we can structure sort of a loan guarantee or something where funders, give you some capacity somehow, maybe some matching funds, but also like a guarantee, like if you end up $3,000 short, that we have a pool that covers that so that you're not holding the bag. And I'm sure there's details that others know about in these situations that work better, but the idea of making that possible with you as a trusted and central source to kind of manage it, but not be taking risk for your own agency.
Yeah. I think that could work.
That's a good idea. I mean, we can front a little bit of the home-based care. We kind of on this don't tell people, but we were able to front theirs, but we can't do $500,000 worth for sure.
No, and I don't think we guarantee $500,000, but you're not going to lose $500,000 in receipts, right?
Correct.
One hopes that it would be.
Yeah, we already have 7 applications submitted, so that means those receipts have been received. So, yeah.
And you have the experience, but you also know that a certain percent of people are going to be irresponsible in a way to make a reasonable assessment of what that loan guarantee. There's no way I'm going to sell a $500,000 loan guarantee to my trustees, but some reasonable sum, and also, if there's need for a few extra hours of admin support or other kind of support to babysit these 2 projects, I think that, I don't know what your capacity is now, given the shifting sands you work in, but sometimes we fund programs and not people to make them happen.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm going to change the subject.
Okay.
I was just going to say, back in July, Diane Braddock was talking with the Youth Services Department and a whole bunch of the, food task board folks and others that had all these issues that were overlapping around these, setting up this system that was providing families, Cornell working families specifically, but also others, I think, a variety of in-home and virtual care and educational options for children during these transitioning times through Cornell HR. And is that something that's even on your radar, or did that affect at all any of the families you have served in a tangible way?
I'm not, this was Cornell and Youth Services?
This was Cornell Human Resources was represented on the youth task force, which, as far as I can tell, isn't even functioning anymore. But but there was a lot of energy around it in like late July, and I've heard nothing about it since then. And I'm just curious. Yeah. It sounds like you're not all that tuned. Maybe it never flew. I don't know.
No, we had staff that was originally set up to try to help the summer issue. And I think that it didn't carry through because no one knew what was going to happen in the fall. The situation with the schools and the delays in securing their plans held everybody up, which
Right.
is why I'm just now telling you about how many school-age programs aren't opening up. They didn't know. So yeah, I don't believe it has continued to meet. Molly McGriff, who's our director in Tompkins, has not given me any information on that. She was the one who was participating.
Okay, I just didn't know if they were able to sort of pivot in recent days or not, so. And I didn't know if there's new opportunities sort of opening in that landscape, but doesn't sound like it.
We've worked with Cornell quite a bit, and the Office of, I keep calling it Workforce Diversity, Equity, and Life Quality because that was their old name, but whatever their new name is, their HR and work family unit, we have throughout. And they've provided some resources for our group family childcare access project, which has been great. But
Great, okay.
So I got a question, and I don't want to lead us too far astray because you may have had other topics or solutions you wanted to raise. But with the after-school care programs, is the issue, as far as you can tell, on the demand side or on the space side?
so
Or some combo?
it's mostly, I think, on the demand side. The Ithaca City School District, which has the largest number of registered providers, meaning they contract for it, gave the message out to all the principals, try to work it out, try to make it happen. And so, I mean, I have a list of who's doing what. The community-based programs have continued, and I think they're going to evolve a little bit. Like GIAC, for example, it's a registered school-age child care program, and they've been doing a hybrid approach to supporting education, but they may open up some more recreational after-school programming, but it's sort of everybody's taking it one step at a time, and it's all evolving. I would say parent needs is pretty high up on the list for some folks. That's for those who actually closed. It was no commitment or limited commitment.
No, I was just wondering if there was some initiative to help transform other spaces into eligible after school, but that's not the case, really. It's about parents feeling comfortable enough for being able to pay for after school care.
Yeah, we did try to look at alternative spaces, and actually the third round of CARES is going to provide money for rent relief for dislocated school-based programs, but it's a little late.
Yeah.
School started.
Yeah, well, and people are figuring out all this hybrid model. If your kid's not in school, you're not needing an after school, right, that day?
That's
so when you were,
that's not 100% true, because people who are still working remotely are finding it impossible to do both, especially for the younger children, to do educational support and work remotely.
Right. All right.
So some of them are actually using the community-based programs. I think there's a couple of them in addition to, at least one in addition to GIAC, that's now offering or looking at offering educational support, we'll call it, as part of their programming.
And then when you were looking through this sort of gruesome table, what were the sort of other areas that there might be leverage points that became clear to you, or possibilities that you were bringing in your mind?
So it's hard to think beyond today, but I think that we are going to have to say, if there's going to have to be some kind of economic relief for ongoing operating expenses, with this loss of income is just not going to be sustainable. So we'll lose everybody otherwise. And I do think that that's as much of a political issue as it is. I mean, we have to go to the government with an S, New York State and the feds, to say that there has to be some change here. New York State's had legislatively a really hard battle with the feds, and so that the Fed, our representatives are saying, why should we give you more? You're not spending what you have. And it's caught up in the cash flow issues of New York State. So I think we have to get over that, and we have to figure out how do we make this really mixed bag a clear enough message that the state and the feds can make some change. And I think that we have to figure out how businesses, how we can leverage their support in a new way. And I think we have to rethink how we pay for quality, because only certain groups get quality care, not other people. So how can we, take the large investment in quality and make it so that it's, I mean, I got a long list, Sue. I'll give you the long list of the future that we have to address.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're also clearly losing a lot of women from the workforce right now. That's happening all over the country. Women are leaving jobs because there's no way to take care of their children during this period, and often they're the lower paid worker. So, and I'm sure that that is having an effect both on the childcare providers themselves, who are thinking, I got to stay home with my kids, and on people not sending their kids to childcare because they are home now. But that's not a long-term answer for our nation, to take women out of the workforce. It just isn't. We don't, in so many fields, we don't have enough workers as it is. I wish I felt that the federal government was going to deal with this anytime soon, but I don't think it is. And I don't think the state government has the money right now to deal with it. Yeah.
Thanks for that depressing addition. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
I just feel like my head.
A lot of the frontline healthcare workers are also women, and so people know that is a highly, they may need childcare, but they really need healthcare workers if the trends continue and the pattern that we've been seeing is going back up in COVID.
Yeah. I mean, even in our region, the numbers are not terrific at all. Broome County, Cortland County, even our own county, we're up to 38 and 2 people in the hospital, which is really nothing compared to most of the country, but it's different here. So it's troubling. And it clearly is in the community. At least here, it's not a college-related phenomenon. Okay, just ask for money. And we'll try to get it to you.
Right. But the problem
I don't think that's the total answer.
No, the operating funds, I mean, to cover the next 6 months of operating losses beyond the ability of any of us, right?
Right.
So then what? Like, is there a half-time care that keeps workers, like once we lose the workforce, then we got no way to rebuild? I hear you saying that. So.
Right.
Well, initially, when COVID hit, what we did was we tried to, we got identified furloughed staff and tried to match them up with essential personnel that needed childcare that would be off hours or weekends and couldn't be met through our regular childcare system. And that worked. It was a very short-term fix, but it worked. They had to make private financial arrangements, and they did that. Possible that some people worked the system a little bit if they got childcare. I don't know. That was outside of my purview. I think there are options there. It kind of harkens the idea of the pods that a lot of people wanted to do, which there are good things and bad things about pods. That's all I'll say. Mm-hmm. Better know who you're matching up with and know what their habits are and have an agreement on how to manage things. And don't, people, I think a big challenge is a lot of people don't understand what the childcare regulations are, and New York State is still doing enforcement. They're still following up on complaints. That's the one area where clearly that's happening.
Hey, Sue. I would think the businesses would start to panic over this. If they ever think they're going to get back to, business as usual, whatever that is now.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any, outreach to business or businesses reaching out to you or daycare centers or adopting a slot type of, just to make sure that when they, have you heard any response from businesses? I guess what I'm asking.
I've heard calls for help. So what can we do? From 3 businesses, larger businesses within the community. And I think that there's more recognition than that that's an issue. I think the biggest challenge is it feels overwhelming. I think adopt a slot is a great idea. That would be a wonderful idea. I think, that there are tax incentives, and maybe that we should do more. We were starting this with that. We had an employer group before COVID and just haven't been able to maintain it. But to really get that word out, that if you do something for childcare, there are tax incentives. Maybe you could, nope, I won't go there. So, I think there are opportunities there. It's a little bit of our capacity to pursue that individually, but I think we are going to have to for the long run. We're looking, at how we can bring that group back together and maybe expand it.
Are there any funds through Workforce?
Well, Workforce has been asking us to, is there anything? We've talked with them. We have the same problem, So I haven't seen anything direct. They're looking for relief funding too. I think we're all sitting in this murky spot.
That kind of reminds me of that other statement that you had made near the beginning about thinking about childcare along with schools. And so, that education, there's a lot of dollars that are wrapped up in that part of our state. Is there better integration in childcare and school?
That's, pressing the educational model has been sort of our go-to place for a while, and that it is education, whether it happens by preserving the diversity of childcare that we have or by integrating into a larger system of school. We're not really seeing that right now. There's not any movement for that kind of universality that we would really like to see for young kids in their education. Right now, it's not about kids. Right now, it's about jobs. And that's what people want to hear. I feel a little like a fish out of water, because for the last 6 months, I haven't talked at all about what's good for kids. And that's kind of like my go-to place, but I just can't, that's not what people want to hear right now.
I was more thinking about the slant of, the jobs, the parents that are working that need childcare, and now they're stuck between schools halftime or every other day, or they might be closing, and then their own work hours changing, and then trying to piece in childcare, which is where you had kind of started. And so just thinking of, is there better integration that our school systems can do along with childcare, and perhaps there's dollars there that could push those two pieces together for the benefit of working community, business.
I would love to think that that's true, but I would say that it's not. I think, when universal pre-K, which happens through the school funding, state ed funding, the public hearings locally on that were pretty loud about it. Like, yes, that's good for kids. And yes, we want to do that, but we can't do it at the expense of the kids that we're already destined to serve. Yeah. And we don't have enough money to do that. So therefore, it's good, but not important enough at this point to cut off what we're trying to do with 5 through 18-year-olds.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth keep pushing. One of the things that I've said to folks is, you know, we have this little vote with kids in mind kind of push, is that early parents, when their kids are young, are really not as vocal. They're a vocal among themselves, but not politically a vocal. They don't have the time, I think. But our candidates need to know that they want change and that it's important to them. And employers need to send the same message. And so that's a piece of our future planning, but that's not going to solve anything on a short-term basis, or even the near term, which I think is what we're trying to do here today, is look at how can we not just do the next couple of months, but how can we do the next year, and then maybe look at the year after that. Like, how are we going to gradually move towards a better system, because it won't work the way it is designed. New York State had a task force. They told them that these situations, you know, they are, before COVID, it was already untenable. And the governor established the task force, just hasn't made the top 10.
Well, it's certainly pointing out the biggest pressures within communities, isn't it? You know, whether if people don't have jobs, they don't have food, and they don't have childcare and housing, and it's one of those top ones. Any other questions? I know we're just about at noon. Sue, are there any other points you want to make or asks you want to say?
Keep helping, keep thinking about what the ideas are, because we're really going to have a broader community response. And I think maybe that's one of the things that we can think about is how can we sponsor something in the future that will bring more groups together. And maybe it would be coming from some of the leaders here, or a leadership group that hosts it, as opposed to the Child Development Council, because I think people have heard me over and over. They need to know that the pressure comes from other leaders too. You know, I think that's the only way it's going to work.
So do you need a smaller group to keep thinking about this or working on this, or volunteering anybody? But I was happy to sit there. I mean, this was one of my concerns. This is going to take a while to really. This isn't a one and done type of thought process. It's gonna. We need to keep steadily working on this. So, and I'm sure there are people in these boxes who would be happy to do that. I would.
So with that, I would say reach out to Sue. Sue, thank you so much for being with us. We'll look to get this recording available for everyone very quickly, and thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
all.
Thank you.